Okay. A very good morning to everyone. As always, we'll wait maybe 3 or 4 minutes for everyone to arrive. Okay, a very good morning, everyone, to this Scopus training, which is focused on quite a specific topic. We're looking at preprints, at topics of prominence and funding acknowledgements in Scopus. My name is Alexander, and I'm actually in Thailand at the moment in a hotel room, so this is not my normal setting. So I'm going to do my best to make things work from here. Luckily, I have with me Nicholas. You're in Singapore, right, Nicholas?
Hey, Sander. Hi, I'm over in Singapore, and it's actually raining cats and dogs right now. So maybe it's a good thing that you are where you are.
It was pouring here last night, like you wouldn't believe. I just got back from Thammasat University, and as soon as I arrived here, it rained like very, very badly for a long time. So our audience today, so good morning anyway. This training is part of the service of the Scopus Consortium in Malaysia. So this is training or webinar number 5 in a series of 6 webinars that we do every year. The audience today is not huge. We have 29 people so far. Maybe that's due to the specific nature of the topic that we chose. Maybe it's not as exciting for as large a group of people, but we're going to try to make it as interesting as possible today. So with that, should we just jump into it?
Let's do it, Sander.
All right, let's go. So the agenda is we're going to give a quick lay of the land. As always, we're going to give an introduction on Scopus, the content that's in Scopus. We'll introduce what are preprints, what are topics, and what are funding acknowledgements conceptually. And then we will show you a demo in scopus.com how that works. And if along the way you have questions or comments, questions preferable if you can use the Q&A box. Comments, you can always put comments into the chat. We're recording today's session, so we can share a link to the recording as well as a link to the PDF of these slides after the training. And at the very end, we'll provide a link and some instructions how you can collect your certificates if that's something that interests you, to have a certificate of completion of this this webinar. We will show you how to do that at the very end. So again, don't be shy to ask questions, comments in the chat. And with that, I guess we'll just start with the first part, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so content in Scopus. So most people, you probably already know that Scopus is a source neutral abstract and citation database. It's a database of peer-reviewed literature that is sourced from many different publishers. So basically, Scopus is a collection of metadata of scientific articles that come from a lot of different journals, books, and conferences, all together in one database. So Scopus does not have the full text. You can link from Scopus to the full text, but Scopus includes metadata. It includes enrichments to the data. So we've, for example, created profiles for every author, for every institution, for every journal, and so forth. And there's a lot of interesting metrics. So not only can you find the content, but you can understand how often something has been cited, or who's working together, or differences in quality between journals or between articles, and so forth. Scopus is also the exclusive source of publication and citation data to both Times Higher Education and QS World University rankings. Scopus is enriched and connected data. So I mentioned the enrichments already, such as citation linking, author profiling, institutional profiling. So we also connect the different entities so that every paper in Scopus is connected to the author, for example. So in this little box or circle on the right, you see the author is at the center. The author is connected to all of the papers that they've written, articles, book chapters, as well as the institutions that they're affiliated to, the co-authors that they work together with, funding data that they've, funding that they've secured, and so forth. So in that sense, because it's connected data, you could search for a person, and from the person link to the article, and from the article link to co-authors, and so forth. Or you could search for an article and link from the article to the author, and link from the author to a different article that they've written, and so forth. So it makes it quite intuitive and helps you to understand the nature of science, because everything's connected, including new data types like preprints, funding acknowledgements, and information on topics, which is what we're going to focus on today. So what are some of the things that we worked on in the last, let's say, 2 years? So we've improved the author profile pages. So every author or researcher that has at least one paper published in a journal, conference, or book that's indexed in Scopus has a profile. Everyone has a profile that is represented in Scopus. We've improved the way that that profile represents the person. So what information is reflected there. Because these profiles are algorithmically created, there's an author feedback wizard that allows you or any researcher to come in and make changes to their profile. So we've worked on making that author feedback wizard even more effective and easy to use. We've edited or updated the document details page. So when you find a particular article in Scopus, if you open that and you see what information is reflected representing a particular article, that's been updated to include new information, including PlumX metrics. So those are kind of the alternative metrics that we've covered quite extensively in previous trainings. We have added preprint content to the Scopus author profiles. Today, we're going to explain in quite a lot of detail what preprints are and how they're different from, let's say, peer-reviewed articles. We've also added more funding data. So if you're looking at what funding is associated to a particular author. That's also been added to the author profile. But today we're focusing more on funding acknowledgements, which is a slightly different thing, which is the acknowledgement of funding in a particular paper. We've also added a open access filter so that you can limit or find the different types of open access papers and journals in Scopus. So did I forget anything, Nicholas? I think the next slide is for you.
No, you didn't. So like Sander mentioned, part of what we are looking to do is to constantly update and to improve the platform itself. So one of our 2022, the key principles behind our 2022 roadmap is to improve the overall ease of use, to improve our research signals, and to overall improve the way we conduct search and the way we do our analytics. Essentially, what we want to do is for our end users to make high value decisions with confidence. So be it as you are as a librarian or a research manager, a funder, or a researcher, we want to deliver all these additional insights to you at your fingertips. Next, back to you, Sander.
Scopus Content. So I mentioned, right, Scopus collects article metadata from 7,000 publishers. I think we covered the basics of that already. But if you get to the nitty-gritty, we have almost 90 million records are reflected in Scopus. 11,000 new articles are loaded every day. We cover almost 6,000 open access journals. But we don't only cover journals, also conferences and books. We have both individual books and standalone books, where a lot of the books focus on social sciences, arts and humanities, where for the conference proceedings, we cover 144,000 conference events, about 11,000 papers, which are very focused on engineering and computer sciences. For the journals, within the article data, we have 18 million records which have funding acknowledgements in them. So that means that for that particular scientific paper, you can see which funding body or which funding bodies have provided the funding to do the research that is represented in that paper. And that's really interesting because you can see for different papers and different topics which funding bodies have been funding them. And that can give you as a researcher a signal on, okay, maybe this is a funding body that I should be interested in looking for funding for. Or it gives you a bit of, let's say, competitive intel on where specific people, specific institutions, sorry, are getting their funding. Also, we've added preprint papers. So again, we'll explain the difference between a preprint and a peer-reviewed paper, but I've added more than 1 million preprints. Currently, those are only visible in the author profile. This year, we've expanded the preprint servers that are covered. So probably we should start to explain what preprints are before we do this slide. So, Nicholas, a preprint is different than a peer-reviewed paper, right? So Scopus has traditionally only covered peer-reviewed journals, peer-reviewed conferences, peer-reviewed books, right? But one of the aspects of peer review is that when you submit a paper, it needs to go through peer review, which means it can take, let's say, a year sometimes before the paper is visible to the public. And sometimes that can be problematic because, let's say, emergency COVID, monkeypox, I don't know, whatever it is, people need to read the initial findings very quickly, right? So you can't wait for everything to make it through peer review because people need to have these early signals of what's going on to save the world, like literally, as in no joke, right? Where they need to solve other very important problems. So researchers have been publishing in parallel to sending a paper to a journal for peer review, they put that manuscript on what's known as a preprint server. And people can read these papers before they've gone through peer review to at least understand what are some of the early signals in important areas. So there are different preprint servers. Each one are typically focused on different fields. And we've expanded which preprint servers are covered by Scopus. Right, so that's an important kind of thing that we improved relevant to today's topic. But we've also added information on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so the SDGs. So for every paper now, you can see which SDGs those papers are associated to. Yeah. And we're adding awarded grants data to the Scopus author profiles. Currently, we don't cover globally all of the funding bodies in the world, so this is maybe a little bit less relevant for Malaysia than it is for Europe or America at this point in time. Okay, so this is like the latest kind of new types of data that we're adding to Scopus. I already gave an introduction about preprints, so we're going to kind of reiterate that, but we'll also look a bit more closely at what are topics and what are funding acknowledgements.
Thanks for that, Sandra. So one of the key things that we are always constantly trying to really improve on is to how do we improve the completeness of information, and like Sandra mentioned, research signals on Scopus itself. Some of you who have joined us in our previous sessions would know about Scopus author profiles. And it's very important, to be honest, because this reflects the holistic perspective of how an author is being represented. So you probably are aware that in terms of the Scopus, we have the author ID, the ORCID ID, the affiliation, you know about your output, you know about your subject area coverage, you know about your H index, your citations as well. And then the other thing that we also have included here would be topics. We also want to make sure that there's more funding data present, as well as the fact that preprints are around so that you know what are the nascent work that an author is able to contribute. Next slide, please, Sandra. So to this end, the value of author profiles is very important because the completeness of the author profile really represents the researcher as much as possible. It shows a compelling reason for the researcher to be hired at different institutions, for them to make a pitch for their funding grants, as well as to signify just how compelling their work is. In this case, many people would be able to see how and why they may want to hire you as a researcher. They'll give you and it will showcase your comparative advantage with other researchers in terms of a promotion and tenureship. You can justify the overall reasons why you should be promoted and why this specific researcher should have more funding. Correspondingly, this also gives you a stronger perspective and platform to showcase them why this researcher should be given a grant, right? And to further consolidate and to justify this, first and foremost, this author profile on Scopus will showcase to other people why your work deserves to be read, why and how often your work has been cited, and therefore people may be compelled to want to cite it further. It would showcase you so that it's easier for you to find collaborators, and people would be able to see just how productive you are as a researcher, as well as the quality of your productivity. We have all this information to really showcase this so as to make it easier for you to conduct your research. Next slide, please, Sandra. So what this really showcases is that the overall improvements to Scopus really wants to help you as a researcher to reflect your research within your customized, your own co-developed data ecosystem, right? So in this case, in terms of your analysis and your competitive advantage, in this case, your research will be showcased. Your profile will be showcased. One of the key things that we have here will be early indicators, right? We talked about subject classifications before. We've talked about metrics and indicators before. But early indicators like preprints and grants really helps to showcase a much more completeness to your profile that's otherwise been seen on Scopus, right? In this case, we are looking to include in preprint data, our funding data as well, and we'll be able to see the other data types like organizational data, researcher data, source data as well. Document data would of course include preprints. Next slide, please, Sander. So the value of preprints is that now you're able to find collaborators in terms of cutting-edge research. Sander mentioned how important it is for preprints to be around. Sometimes it would take too long for a peer-reviewed article to be indexed in Scopus. And this sometimes, like in cases like monkeypox, as well as COVID-19, to wait for research to be fully generated may take some time. So this is the value of preprints, right? Because you're able to find collaborators now at the cutting edge of research. You can get a much more comprehensive overview. And the preprints also helps you to get funding agencies as well, right? So this helps funding agencies to monitor the progress and to widen the opportunity for comments. So all this is actually a huge functioning ecosystem. We've been slowly including all this information, all the preprints to Scopus over time. Phase 1 happened in Q4 of 2020 when we had 0.6 million of preprints from the last 3 years in archive, bioarchive, and chemical archive, where we have enriched over 1 million author profiles. In phase 2, which is the third quarter of 21, we have 0.25 preprints in SSRN that have increased the number of enriched author profiles to 1.4 million. And one thing that we try to highlight is that when it's added to Scopus, they are very clearly separated from the curated published content that you can see over here under the author profile. You can see documents, you can see citations, and very crucially, you can see preprints as well. Next slide, Sander. And that's over to you.
Yes, so we've talked about preprints quite a bit now, and one of the other topics of today is topics. That's funny, right? Topics of Prominence is a model. It's a model for understanding the structure of science. So typically we divide science into subject areas, into fields, and into topics. So in Scopus, for example, you have 27 main subject areas. So those are very basic subject areas: math, engineering, medicine, chemistry, psychology, and so forth. At the discipline level, you have 333 disciplines. Those are also in Scopus. Those would be like within medicine, you have disciplines like oncology or genetics or surgery and so forth, right? That model is very useful, but it's based on journal classification. So every journal gets a subject area and a discipline. And those subjects and disciplines, they never change. They're always the same every year. Topics of Prominence is a data model that really looks at the structure of science by using citation linking to connect papers that belong together. And it, for example, can group papers that are published in journals that have very different categories. So for example, let's say I publish a paper in a psychology journal and Nicholas publishes a paper in a medical journal, and one of you publishes a paper in a sociology journal, but I'm citing Nicholas and Nicholas is citing you, and maybe you're citing me as well. So there's this connection in terms of citations. That citation behavior, like real human behavior of citing each other, infers relationship between our papers. So our papers, even though they are published in very different subject areas based on the journals that we're publishing in, can be included in the same topic in this model, because very likely we are probably addressing the same problem or the same topic, but from a different angle. So for example, with COVID, you could look at the psychology of COVID-19, you could look at the medical aspects of COVID-19 as well as the sociological aspects. and so forth, right? So we've used this to take all of the papers in Scopus and create a model that has 96,000 topics. It's incredibly granular. We've also ranked those topics to identify the topics which are relatively prominent. That means those topics have a lot of momentum. They're being published in top journals, receiving a lot of citations, being published in top journals, and so forth, right? What this does is creates a model where every topic represents a really specific area, which you can say is a topic or something of that has common intellectual interest. You have some big topics, you have small topics, you have new ones, you have old ones. The topics could evolve, right? So if you look at the topics today, will be different than 5 years ago. And if you look in 5 years or even next year, the topics will have a different structure. New topics can be born. So the model evolves along with science. Today we have, I think, at least 50 topics related to COVID-19. Some of them are about radiological findings of COVID-19, psychological effects of COVID-19, and so forth. Those topics did not exist before COVID-19. So the model evolves along with the reality that is being investigated through science. The topics are, as mentioned, inherently multidisciplinary because they group papers based on citation behavior, not based on journal categories. It's not based on subject areas. You might have old topics that are not really actively being investigated. For example, nickel-cadmium batteries were a big thing in the 80s and 90s, but now that we have lithium-ion, that research is probably still there. It may not be something that a lot of people are very actively pursuing at this moment. Researchers have mobility. They can contribute to multiple topics. So a researcher can publish in several different topics, right? So this is the way that the topics look. So this is what we call direct citation clustering. It's a model used in bibliometrics already for a long time, but because of supercomputing power, we can now use the papers in Scopus. We only use the ones 1996 to present to create the, let's say, roughly 100,000 topics. So you can see this paper cites this one, this one, and this one. This one cites this one, and so forth. So you start to see clusters emerge where we would divide this into clusters. So you minimize the links between clusters, maximize the links within clusters. You then, to validate this, show this, right? We show this to researchers and they look at these articles, at these clusters and say, wow, this is really, you know, we refine this and tell researchers that this really corresponds to a specific area of science that or a specific problem in science that we're trying to solve. So they're really, really specific areas. Probably you'll understand the areas related to your own field. If you look at the areas in other fields, you might be like, I'm not sure I understand, because they're very granular, right? I mentioned this, so we used researchers to confirm this. We also looked at the level of funding data. So as you know, funding opportunities are often very specific. So they might say, we're looking to provide funding for research that should investigate, and then they have a very, very specific area that's defined. We designed this topic structure so that one topic should kind of align with the level at which funding is provided. Let me think. So I mentioned that every topic has a prominence indicator. So we rank the topic so that you can see which topics are relatively prominent and which ones are less prominent. That prominence indicator is based on 3 indicators within that. So it's the citation count in the last year, the view count, so the number of times the papers were viewed in the last year, as well as the Cite score, so the relative quality of the journal in the most recent year. Prominence, we use the word prominence. We were thinking of calling it hot topics, but we would not want to tell someone that their topic is cold. So you have topics which are relatively prominent in a given moment of time. A topic that's not prominent can still be important, right? It can be an important topic. Maybe a topic that's not very prominent can be a topic that has maybe less momentum and focus, right? So right now, one of the most prominent topics in the world is COVID-19. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on that. If you look at nickel-cadmium batteries, there was a lot of focus on that. It's probably still a very important scientific finding, but maybe today it doesn't have that much focus, and that would be reflected in the prominence metric. Those were our concepts. So we have outlined to you what Scopus is, that you can find all of this fantastic article metadata, profiles, right? Peer-reviewed content, preprints, funding acknowledgements, and topics of prominence. Now we would like to demonstrate how some of that looks in Scopus itself. So I will. So Nick, can you see Scopus?
Yep, pretty much clear.
All right, so what are we going to start with?
Do we want to do monkeypox this time around?
Monkeypox, okay. How do I spell it? With an X? Pox?
X, yeah.
That's such a new age spelling. Okay. So Scopus already has 1,400 papers on monkeypox, right? So what do we want to look at, Nick?
We could look at probably the most cited one if we want to,
All
or
right.
we could look at
Sure?
the most, yeah.
Ooh, I see monkeypox has already been mentioned in, wow, that's a long time ago.
We could filter it by this year's one if we want to.
Sure. All right, let's look at just the last 2 years. Okay, this is interesting. A challenging epidemiology of human monkeypox, a potential threat, systematic review. So I'm going to open this paper. Couple things we see. So this is that article page that we were talking about. So every article's got this page that has the full metadata. You can see it's been published in PLOS Neglected Tropical Diseases. So that's the journal. It's published in Open Access Journal. We can see the authors, right? We can see who's first author. We can see where they're affiliated. We see it's a relatively highly cited paper at the moment. And our search term was monkeypox, so you can see it hit monkeypox several times. Now, here, we see some cool things. So we see keywords. This article being a medical related paper has got mesh terms and M-tree medical terms. So you can, again, we hit some of these terms in our search. If we look at SciVal topics, you can see that this topic is called monkeypox, which makes sense because it's about monkeypox. So there is a topic in Scopus and in SciVal in this data model that we talked about called topics of prominence, called monkeypox and orthopox virus animals. And we see that it's in the 82nd percentile. So that so 100% would be the highest, 82 is top 25%, top 20% or so. And if I wanted to know more about this area, I can see its some representative documents. We can see here keywords, and these are taken from the abstracts of the papers. So you can see it's related to orthopox virus, monkeypox, vaccine, smallpox, and so forth. We can identify the top authors in the world that are publishing in that topic. And you can see you can kind of rank the keywords by relevance. If you have access to SciVal, you can view it in Cite. I think currently in Malaysia, not that many people have access to Cite. It's something that hopefully will change in the future, but for now, you just be able to see this within Scopus. So you can understand that this paper about monkeypox is in a topic related to monkeypox, and that it's a relative prominent topic. And you can see some of the papers and authors here, which you can link through to their author profile. So that's one thing. Funding details. We can see that this paper was funded by the Bavarian Nordic. And you can see the funding text. The study was initiated and funded by the Bavarian Nordic. So we know now who has paid for the research. And that's interesting to do. So you can do that by finding a paper and looking here at the funding sponsor. But I'll show you later in the advanced search, if you want to see all papers that were funded by, for example, Bavarian Nordic or by the Ministry of Higher Education in Malaysia, or by NRF Singapore, and so forth, you can do a search in Scopus to find all the papers which have a particular funding funder in the funding acknowledgements. It's not what we're talking about today, but you can see here the metrics, right? So we can see this is a relatively highly cited paper. And here we can see the Plum X details about this particular paper, which we always like to cover because it's so cool. And sometimes people don't always find it. So we can see that, for example, this paper has been tweeted about, it's not only been cited, but it's been cited by policy, World Health Organization that are citing this paper. It's been mentioned in the news a lot, as we know, monkeypox has been very newsworthy, but there are, news articles that mention this systematic review specifically, as well as blogs. So people who are blogging about science and findings have been mentioning this paper. And it's being used in the references of Wikipedia articles, including some in different languages. And here you can see that it's been, wow, it's got 963 Twitter interactions. So there's a lot of information that you can find about papers. So I'll just go back here. But we wanted to focus on funding acknowledgements, topics, and preprints. So how are we going to demonstrate preprints? So let's, I think in the beginning, what we said is preprints are only included in the author profiles at this moment. So you have to search for an author. Nick, you got any suggestions?
Yeah, you went a bit too fast. I was going to say that we could go back to the original title, the one from the search history. We can take a look at the 327 results, and we could possibly see one of the authors who wrote the paper as well, to see if he or she has written any other papers. Or we could go into topic pages and we can see who are the top author in for monkeypox at the moment. We could do either one.
All right, so I'm going to do the funky way, and I'm going to analyze the search results. And I'm going to go to top authors. So these are the top authors represented in that search results that this search here. And we see CM Hughes. So I'm going to go up here to CM Hughes. Just going to open the profile page. And we see here the author profile. Christine Marie Hughes in Atlanta, Georgia. So we can see a lot about Christina, including their peer-reviewed papers, right? So these are 41 peer-reviewed papers. And I see, hey, preprints. So this person has published a preprint in the Med, how do you pronounce this?
Archive.
Med Archive,
yeah.
So I shouldn't say Rigsfoot. So in 2022, so this is new. And if you wanted to read the latest findings that this person, who's obviously focused on monkeypox research, latest findings before it makes it through peer review, you'd be able to go to this paper, right? So this is not yet peer reviewed. Very likely, they've also sent it to a journal, so it's probably in peer review right now. And you can here read the abstract, and just like with the rest of the Scopus articles, if you want to read the paper, you got to link out, and boom,
PMJ.
here we are. So if I wanted to download the PDF, yeah, I really like this. So, you know, when I was at the ambition of being a researcher, you want to find the latest stuff that's going to give you the edge, you know, so you really understand the latest developments, especially if it's something that you're thinking about doing research yourself. You need to kind of pick up where the field is left off, right? You don't want to repeat something that someone else has already done or not benefit from the insights of the latest research. So yeah, the whole paper's here. So you just have to keep in mind it's not peer reviewed yet, but if the author, you know, based on their profile, you can see if it's a reputable author, right? So for Christine Hughes, H-index of 17, 41 peer-reviewed papers. So this is a, let's say, probably mid-career researcher. So it gives me a little bit trust in those papers as well, that they'll probably make it through peer review. But you know, they're interesting to read, and you can find the preprints here. So a question to the audience, and you can answer this in the chat. So this question for you is, do you think Scopus should include preprints in the main search results? So for example, if we did the search for monkeypox here, and I do a search and I get, should we have, for example, a tab or in some other way mix in the preprints here, maybe with a label that it's a preprint, or should we limit them to be only visible in the author profile? What is your preference and why? If you can put that in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. This is literally something that Scopus is thinking about.
So it's been really quiet in this session so far. So we've been talking for some time, and it'd be great to have your insights as well, because at the end of the day, we will usually communicate with our product teams to let them know about what the end users are facing. So if this is a chance for you to actually be heard, so do type in the chat and let us know, and then we can communicate what the community feels over to the product teams as well. So please do let us know.
I feel like there should be some music playing, like da 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 da.
I think there's a couple of questions in the Q&A chat box.
Oh, okay.
So the first one goes, do all publishers...
Chat, it says chat disabled.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's why no one responded. So I'm going to go
into the Q&A box. I think you have to do, like, unfortunately, people would have to type in the Q&A box, but I think that's perfectly fine.
How do I, there should be a way to enable the chats. Wait. Do you know where I do it, Nick?
No, unfortunately not. I had the same issue the last time around. So the workaround was to type them into the Q&A itself.
Weird, because I thought it always worked in all of our previous sessions.
I think there've been some updates to Zoom recently, so maybe the functionality has changed a bit somewhat. Because I'm pretty sure we used to have that as well.
Yeah.
Well, on the bright side, Sander, the replies are coming in through the Q&A box.
Yeah, so if you just want to write it in the Q&A box, just write it. So please, for whatever reason, the chat's not working. We don't know why. Okay, so no, I found the button. Okay, the chat is working now. It should work. So use either the chat or the Q&A and let us know, should preprints be included in the main search results or only be visible in the auth profile? And if you have some thoughts on why, yeah, share your thoughts. Like, this is, again, it's your chance. We do get asked by the Scopus product team, you know, what do you guys think? And we would love to base that on you people that are actually using Scopus and made it all the way here to our webinar.
We do have one question though.
Said Jairo says, yes, it should be added with a label. Yes, Nisat, Saiden, I would prefer to have an option where I can choose for preprint in search result. Okay. So that's clear. Anyone else have any thoughts at all? Are preprints as credible as published articles? How good already are they? Or are they alerts only instead of actual citation purposes? That's a great question. So I think the reason for clearly making a difference between peer-reviewed papers and preprints is because preprints have not made it through peer review, and you know from a peer review process that a high percentage of papers that are sent for peer review don't make it through peer review, or the reviewer asks for changes to be made before it gets published, right? So I would say they're early signals. They're worth reading and considering, but some caution is needed, and maybe to keep track of whether that paper makes it through peer review later. I'm wondering if you cite a preprint, you could cite it as being a preprint. You could even in your text acknowledge that it's a preprint and that the conclusions based on that are tentative ones, and that one should look at whether those findings are verified in other research and whether the papers with covering that make it through peer review. So I think it's a little bit about the narrative that you create around such information. So a preprint you would use a little bit differently than peer-reviewed articles, right? It's not been scrutinized quite as much, but they can provide a very important early signal. So for sure, a lot of the stuff that we heard about COVID in the early days was not peer-reviewed. Does that mean that you can't report on it? No, have to report on it because it's an emergency, right? But then, of course, everyone knew that at this point, a lot still needed to be learned and verified. And that's kind of how science works, is you have early discovery needs to go through peer review. You need to have other people that replicate it. All of that makes it through peer review until you have like a well developed body of knowledge about a topic. But it's always got to start somewhere. So it's interesting to see that beginning. But yes, you probably need to be a little bit more careful and acknowledge that if you're mentioning that as a source, that it is a preprint. So it's a preliminary kind of tentative finding that needs to be further validated. So that was a really long sentence from my part, but those are my thoughts. What do you think, Nick?
No, I do agree with you entirely on that, because it's very crucial that when it comes to preprints, they are in a way early indicators of research. We all know how important research is, and sometimes we know that the peer review process is entirely necessary and it is very crucial. So I think it's great that now we are optimizing so that we have more sources and you now have more alternative sources of information. But the caveat is there, right? The preprint hasn't been peer reviewed yet. You don't know the veracity of the research being put out, but you can consider these possibilities. But at the end of the day, you need to bear in mind that this has not been verified yet. And this has to be verified, right? You definitely need a peer-reviewed process to be conducted to make sure that the scientific accuracy is there as well. So you really have to, I would say it takes you need to be mature about looking at both sources of information, and then that's the best way that you can benefit from it. That's my perspective on it.
Okay, yeah, and I find it fascinating because we're often looking at established bodies of knowledge, and now we're looking at really early indicators, what the role is, how do you report on that? So what else can we see in the data? So I'm just, again, going back to our search monkeypox just this year and last year. I'm going to analyze the search results. Yeah, so there were 50 papers last year on monkeypox. This year already many times that. So you can see there's this, it's going up because there's signs that monkeypox has been spreading a bit, right? So beyond the authors, right, we can see which affiliations, countries, so yeah, United States, document types, but we can also see the funding sponsor. So remember we talked about funding acknowledgements and seeing who funds a particular paper. Here we can see who has funded. So it's the National Institute of Health, Center for Disease Control, here Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, here Chinese Academy of Sciences, so to see something that's not American. Europe Horizon 2020 Framework Program. So you can see those are funding bodies that have funded the most papers related to monkeypox. Sorry, I have to go back here. What else can we see? So I was thinking, what if we limit to Malaysia? So if we take this search, go back to the search results. And I'm not going to confuse everyone. I'm just going to go back to the beginning and do this. Guaranteed I am confusing everyone, but so I'm going to say monkeypox only makes me feel old. Look at these years. I think. All right, 2021 to present. And country, Malaysia. Okay, so everyone understands we're searching in the abstract title keywords. Monkeypox is the term, and we're looking at papers just published in Malaysia from 2021 to present. Maybe we'll find something. I'm not sure. 5 papers. Okay. 5 papers. Oh, this paper is highly cited. So what can we see about this paper? There is at least one Malaysian author that's collaborated with others. So
I think that will be under I, Unimas.
Yeah, there we go. Funding details. So you can see that this paper was funded by more than one funder.
This is a pretty cool paper.
Prints of Songkla. That's cool. So sometimes universities are the funder. And you can read the funding text. Now let's turn it around. What if we want to see all the papers published by a particular funding body? So we're going to go back into Scopus, and I need to do an advanced document search. Or can I do it here as well? Yeah,
I think that's funding sponsor.
Yeah. I could just do funding sponsor. I'm going to get rid of this one. And I'm going to say anytime, all years. Funding sponsor, let's look at so that means that the funding sponsor has the word Malaysia in it. I do this because I just want to see what the names are of the funding bodies, how they're represented in the data. Here, like, oops, sorry, it's messy. There we go. So, Ministry of Higher Education, Commentarian Science, Technology, and Innovation, mostly. So, or University Science Malaysia. So if I want to see what has University Science Malaysia been funding, I can take that name and go back to here. Oops. Oh, it's a lot of documents.
Let's take a look by year, actually. I'll be curious to see how that one works.
Yeah, there you go.
What happens when you click on See Opportunities, Sandra? Where does that link you to?
That links you to Funding Institutional. And that is subscription based. So I didn't want to tease people showing them something that they don't have access to here, but you can see USM Penang. Been a while since I went to Penang, but you went recently, didn't you?
I did, actually.
Was the food good?
Excellent. And I think it was great to see people and researchers face to face again. So it was nice to make the reacquaintance of some very old names.
Okay, so basically by searching for a particular funder, you can find the papers, and by looking in the funding details of the paper, you can see which funding bodies have funded a particular research project that results in the paper. So again, all of that's visible, right? You can find preprints in the author profiles. At the paper level, you can find the funding details and the SciVal topic. So you can see that this paper has actually been put in a topic related to zinc oxide nanoparticles antibacterial activity, which is very, 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 very prominent topic. It's the 1% most prominent topics in the world. If I wanted to know more about this topic, I can see here antibacterial activity, green synthesis, zinc oxide, and so forth. These top authors in the world. Looks very Chinese. These are some of the representative papers, right? So that is all information that is in Scopus. I'm wondering, have we missed anything, Nicholas, from what we intended to talk about?
Maybe we can go to the topic pages in terms of the author profiles as well. Do you want to show them that?
Yes, yeah, that's a good idea. So if, let's just look here at Amina. So we're back to an author profile. This person doesn't have a huge number of papers, but we can also see the topic. So you can see that this person is publishing in precisely that topic related to zinc oxide. But if we search for an author right here, we look at my favorite author. Who was my professor in psychology, Richard Riderinkov. Oh, he's got separate profiles.
You got to clean it up for him.
Yeah. Right. So we see he's not a young man anymore. It's an H index of 67. But here you see most contributed topics. So he's a researcher in developmental psychology who studies normal aging, which we call neurocognitive aging, and specifically executive functions and how the executive functions of the brain change in normal aging, right? So healthy people as they age, as well as unhealthy aging. So if people were to get sick, so it's a lot looking at the functions of the brain, like inhibition, short-term memory, mental flexibility, how these things change as we age, and how that changes with natural aging, right? So what's normal as well as what's abnormal. But if I look at the topics that he publishes in, I recognize it. I'm like, yes, inhibitory control, proactive inhibition, cognitive dysfunction, short-term memory. So people, as they get older, tend to, short-term memory gets a little bit worse, right? In some people, the short-term memory gets a lot worse, and that would be considered a dysfunction because they can't remember what you said 5 minutes ago or what they said 5 minutes ago. That's not good. Punishment, ultimatum game, guilt aversion. Not sure what that's about. Some of them is technical stuff like diffusion weight imaging, white matter, magnetic resonance imaging, because he does brain scans to look at what parts of the brain underlie very specific functions. So if you can see, for example, that a person who has a particular dysfunction, their mental flexibility, let's say their ability to flexibly do different tasks at the same time, as well as their short-term memory, has been significantly impaired. And then if you do a brain scan, do you see differences with a normal, healthy person, so that you can start to understand which part of the brain is responsible for which cognitive function. Yeah, so which part of the brain, looking at the motor cortex and looking at stimulation. So I think these are techniques to stimulate your more magnetics, resonance imaging. But anyway, I recognize this because I know the researcher. I did my research internship with him and wrote a paper. Yeah, so it makes sense to me. Again, these topics are incredibly granular, so they probably make sense to people that have some understanding of the field. And you can see this for a particular author. As mentioned, an author can be active in a lot of different topics. If you want to understand the topic, you can click on it and see, all right, this is what this is about at a global level. These are some of the top authors in the world. These are some of the representative papers. Anything else we've forgotten?
No, I think this is pretty much, I think, what we wanted to set out to do to showcase to them today. I think it's been very comprehensive. We are able to showcase how they are able to go to an author profile level, how they're able to get the information which they're looking for, so that it's much more holistic, and how they're able to go to an article level as well, to be able to, well, look for funders as well.
Okay, so we don't want to, start repeating ourselves. Maybe we can win a bit of time back today. I still need to have breakfast and prepare some things for my meetings. So we hope that this was insightful. If you have questions, please still put them in the Q&A box. We have a couple more minutes. If there are no questions, we can just give you the certificate, right? So as always, if you want a certificate, you're very welcome to have one. You can link to the page using the QR code or the bit.ly link here. It will link you to a survey. This survey asks you what you think of my performance and Nicholas's performance today. We hope you can find it in your heart to give us a positive rating, because it affects our lives. We certainly hope that what we prepared for you today is somewhat interesting, even though it's a bit of a niche topic in the broader spectrum of things. I hope that it's useful for you. We have one more training left this year. I forgot, it's about United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I will take the recording link, the link to this recording, as well as the PDF of these slides, and make sure it's sent to you in an email. I think 24 hours from now, Zoom will automatically send you an email with this information. But for the certificate, please take a picture of this slide. Because once we close it, typically we get a lot of emails saying, hey, I don't know how to get my certificate. Take a picture of the slide. Everything you need is here. You need the workshop code. So you cannot get the certificate without workshop code, which is here, capital HHZF, FKM. So you need all this information to get your certificate if that's something that's important to you. This will be included, this slide will be included in email tomorrow to everyone. I think we have some help pages and stuff we want to show them.
Yeah,
yeah.
Some people were asking for the survey link in the chat box. Let me do
Oh,
it
yeah,
as well.
do that. Yeah, good idea. And you want to give them the workshop code?
I will copy everything. So for your convenience, please find the survey and the workshop code in the chat box as well. So you can just click on it.
All right, so we're going to move on to, so this one is the last one, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. What are they? How can I find the relevant data? September 27th. This is the QR code to sign up. You can either hit that now or you can receive these slides tomorrow. Assuming you have time, you can open the slide deck, go up to this slide and register. I'll just leave it open here for a minute. So that would be the last one for this year. If you have strong thoughts about topics that we should cover in future trainings, shoot us an email or put it in the chat, or any way that you want to communicate that. We every year have to come up with like an agenda of trainings, and we're always thinking of what topics should we cover this year. And I hope we can cover something different next year instead of repeating the same thing every time, right? So ideas are very welcome. Help resources, Nicholas, you are the expert at this, please.
Sure thing. So first and foremost, so we do have a Scopus certification program for librarians. For those of you who are interested, feel free to reach out to me and I will submit your name into the program itself as well. Otherwise, for more information, you can go to the Scopus info site where you can get information and the library guide. There's one thing which I really like, and that's actually the Scopus blog. So if you go to blog.scopus.com, you will actually be able to find information pertaining to the latest updates and to Scopus itself. The other one which I want to show you is actually in the next slide. So if you please, Sander.
Sure thing.
We actually have a Scopus Support Hub where you'll be able to find a repository of questions and answers to all the queries that you probably would find. So you can either click on the link that you can see over here, or you can just simply type Scopus Support Hub into Google itself, and you'll bring you to the site there. So these are some of the very useful support centers and materials that you may require. So if any further questions, feel free to reach out to Sander, to myself, or to our colleague, Dr. Benny Young, whose contact you can see over there as well.
Yeah, and Benny's based in Malaysia, so he might be able to come and visit you. You should all email Benny.
If you have any additional queries that you'd like to be resolved face-to-face as well. But yes, do feel free to leverage on these resources. They're all really powerful, I think, and really useful as well. I can't begin to recommend the Support Hub enough. But in the meantime, we'll all be around to support you if necessary.
Yeah, in all seriousness, Nicholas and I will also be visiting Malaysia more often now that the border is relatively easy to cross. I'll actually be there the first week of September, no, the last week of August, I'll be there. So anyway, we hope that this was interesting to you or useful in some way. We were open to suggestions. But I think it's okay to end early today. Oh, this is some extra information that we had here, but I think I'm just gonna call it a day. So with this, we thank you very much for your attendance and wish you well. Take care and see you soon. And thanks, Nick. As always, pleasure.
Likewise, Sander. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.